Salutations. In this week's video, I will demonstrate how to automate backing up an SQL database and restoring that database under a different name on the same host. Real-life use cases can be where production and the development SQL servers share the same host. We can even schedule nightly backups and daily restores using this PowerShell code to completely automate this solution. Follow along and let's begin. Okay, so I have Management Studio on this server that shows our database here called testDB. If I expand this and look at our tables, we can see two tables here, AWS services and imported from OscarDB. So if we do a select on this, we can see there's some data in AWS services, 185 rows to be exact. So our mission at hand is to automate backing up this testDB instance and then later restore it to another database here called restoredb. So let's go ahead and create this other database called restoredb. Okay, so obviously this contains no data as it was just created. Okay, great. Okay, let's go ahead and open our editor. The first thing we want to do is define the SQL and database information. We set our instance name. Instead of using localhost, use the name listed in SQL Studio. You can get that from here. We define our database name. We define our backup directory. Now I want the date to be in the name so that I can specify which backup to restore when we come to that part. Because if we want to automate this directory will hold all the backups. So we want to make sure they have different names so that they are not overwritten and we know which backup is which. So our backup file name will be the name of the database plus the date in this format. Also keep in mind for restores, you can specify which backup, whether to grab the previous day backup or today's backup. Okay, so we're going to use the SQL Server SMO assembly to complete this, and we need to load it. If you install the Client Tools SDK, you already have it on your system. If not, install the Client Tools SDK to get it. We load it with this line of code, and you can pipe it out to out null to not see the output. Next, we want to create the SMO server object from our server instance, and we assign that to our server variable. Okay, once we have that, we create an SMO backup object. So we assign our backup variable to a new SMO object. Once that is set, we define our backup.action type to be a database with this line. Then we assign our backup.database to be the name of our database. Boom. Okay, so now we have a backup object with properties assigned to it. So we will be restoring this to a new database name. So we need to set some backup options. We need to add the backup device with this line of code. Then we call SQL backup on our backup variable specifying the server. This will actually initiate the backup. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Let's first check our directory where our backup file will get created. Okay. Okay, that completed. No message. And if we look in our backup directory, we see our .back file here and it is 3.1 kilobytes in size. Okay, great. So to automate backups, we can just add a scheduled task and call the script to run, say, every day at 1 a.m. to get a nightly backup of our database. And we add the date and time to the name of the file so that we know what backup it is. Okay, so now what about restoring our database into, say, a backup or development database, which in my case is hosted on the same server but doesn't have to be. Your server can be hosted on a completely different server. You will just have to take into consideration moving and accessing the backup file. Okay, so let's just delete everything from our backup object and down. We still have our SMO server object, but this time for the restore, we will create an SMO restore object. Then we specify the backup file to restore from with the add device property. We specify the file location. So let's add a few more variables. Our backup file path will be our directory plus file name. Let's also add our data file, our new database name, and store that under target database name. Our data file path and a log file path where our new files will be stored. Okay, so back to our add device. We specify our backup file path, and that is a file. Next, we set our restore.database property, and we point that to our target database. Now we have to specify that the restore restores to a new data file path and log file paths, and we do that with these two lines of code. You can see here we specified this new file name here. Now we add those files to the relocate files property of restore like so. Now what I have found to get these to work, we're adding these two lines. We have to explicitly set the replace database property to true and the file number to be 1. Once that's set, we call the restore with restore.sql restore on the server. And that would be it. And we call restore on what we labeled the server instance. So let's run this. And that completed with no errors. Okay, let's abort and disconnect from the server. Now let's look at our database to see if it restored. Let's connect and refresh. Let's expand this. And now we see our tables listed here. So if we run a select on our restored database, we get data, and it's all our 185 rows of data. So we successfully restored our test database to restore database under a new name using PowerShell. And that's it, folks. And to fully automate this solution, you would set up a scheduled task like I showed in previous videos, where you would call the script through Task Scheduler at whatever point in time you want the backup or restore to take place. And don't worry, in the coming weeks, what I will do is all of the scripts that we create will be conveniently packaged and labeled on AIPsolutions.tech website. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. This has been brought to you by AIP Solutions.